This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, the editor-in-chief at FanDuel and at NumberFire.com, and this is episode 455 of the Late Round Podcast, the many shows that are part of the FanDuel Podcast Network. Oh, thanks for tuning in. FanDuel Sportsbook is giving new users an opportunity to win big on this Sunday's matchup between the Titans and the Browns. Right now, you have a chance to bet $5 on either team at plus 2,500 odds, and if you win, you'll make $125. You heard that correctly. Bet $5, win $125. The offer is for this Sunday's game only, so download the FanDuel Sportsbook mobile app, sign up, and make your first deposit to see your enhanced odds today. Must be 21 years or older and present in Indiana, Illinois, or Tennessee. New users only. Must wager on designated boost market. Deposit required. Max bonus $125. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Indiana, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Or in Tennessee, call Tennessee Redline 1-800-889-9789. So we all know Austin Ekeler came back this past week, and he was featured in that Chargers offense. He had a 31.3% target share. Now that won't keep up, but it still shows us that Justin Herbert is not afraid to dump it off like we saw with Tyrod Taylor to start the year. That's a great sign. But what we saw in that game was Keenan Allen dropping below a 20% target share for the first time this season in a completed game. And I say completed game because he left that one game earlier this season against the Saints. I'm not putting a ton of stock into this, but I do think that it's at least worth monitoring. That we may not see as high of a ceiling for Allen in terms of target share. The good news is that the Chargers have a pretty good schedule down the stretch, so hopefully none of this actually matters. James Robinson just keeps getting absurd volume in that Jacksonville offense. He's now handled 96.5% of Jacksonville's running back rushes this year, which is easily the highest running back rush share in the league. I mentioned this on a previous episode earlier in the season, but the high from any running back dating back to 2011, which is where I go back to with my data, the high was Christian McCaffrey last year at a 91.1% running back rush share. James Robinson is at 96.5%. That's the main reason that Robinson, even with a tough schedule down the stretch, he should still be fine. As I mentioned on yesterday's 15 Transactions episode, I wouldn't expect him to maintain his season-long average. But that doesn't mean that he won't be valuable. Volume equals fantasy points. The third trend this week is one that everyone's talking about, but it's about Alvin Kamara. Since Taysom Hill's taken over that offense, so 2 games worth of data, Kamara has 3 targets, 1 catch, and minus 2 yards receiving. He's ranked 25th or worse in weekly scoring at the running back position in both of those games, after giving us 0 performances up to that point of the season where he ranked outside the top 10 in weekly PPR scoring. Maybe this is partially a foot injury that he's dealing with, but I definitely don't think it's only that. Because the Saints are targeting their running backs at about half the rate that they were when Drew Brees was under center. It's hard to trust Kamara as anything more than an RB2 until Drew Brees gets back. It's been 3 weeks since Nick Chubb returned from injury, and he's been his typical self. One weird thing that was emerging in weeks 10 and 11, his first 2 games after coming back from injury, was that Kareem Hunt was seeing a lot of work in the red zone and close to the goal line. Now, some of those numbers were apparently being accumulated by Hunt because Nick Chubb had a contact lens issue. That was against Philadelphia. So Hunt just kept getting work at the goal line while Chubb was sidelined. But the good news is that on Sunday against Jacksonville, Chubb had 4 red zone attempts to Hunt's 1. He had 2 goal line carries and Hunt had 1. Kareem Hunt is still on the field more than we'd like, or at least more than a manager with Nick Chubb would like. But at least the trend is reversing a bit. Oh, and by the way, Nick Chubb saw a season-high 11% target share against Jacksonville. That's pretty fun too. Travis Fulgham saw just a 4.8% target share in Week 12 against Seattle. He played just 52% of the team's snaps when Greg Ward played 67% and Jalen Reagor 61%. Alshon Jeffrey was at 49%. But that was Fulgham's worst game and worst usage since becoming a thing for the Eagles. Now, he had a 21% target share in Week 11, so I don't know if he's droppable in normal leagues. But I do think that he can be dropped in shallower leagues. And I'll be honest, I didn't see this type of implosion coming for Philadelphia. I was into them as a buy low given their schedule was so nice during the second half of the year, and guys would be getting healthier. But that offensive line combined with poor play from their quarterback, That just torpedoed everyone in that offense not named Dallas Goedert and maybe not named Miles Sanders. I had Jarvis Landry as a buy low in a 15 transactions episode a couple of weeks ago, and he finally came through with a big performance in a plus matchup against Jacksonville. And I mean, let's give this passing attack for Cleveland a little bit of a break, given the weather that they've been playing in. They finally had a good weather game, and they looked competent, relatively competent. I understand it was against Jacksonville, but it was still good to see. Since Odell Beckham's season-ending injury and including the game OBJ got hurt since it happened early in that game, Landry's averaging almost a 29% target share per game. With matchups against Tennessee and then both New York teams upcoming and the Ravens sandwiched in between, he's still someone that I would want on my roster. Antonio Gibson saw a 29.2% target share on Thanksgiving. That was easily his season high. He also tied a season high with a 65.2% snap share in that contest. And he dominated. Hopefully it's a sign of things to come. I will say, or I should point out, that Washington doesn't have the best schedule in the world moving forward. They get the Steelers in Week 13, then the 49ers, who looked better in Week 12, and then Seattle, where they could see a negative game script, and then Carolina in the Fantasy Championship. You've got to keep riding Gibson because he's a beast. But it'll be interesting to see his usage if and when Washington's not in a positive or a neutral game script. This season, the top weekly tight end in PPR formats has averaged just a little over 24 fantasy points. So in other words, if you look at all the tight end one performances, and I'm talking about the tight end one, they've averaged 24 PPR points per game. If you felt like the position has sucked this year, this is one indication that it has. Because dating back to 2011, that's the lowest tight end one average that we've seen. Now, I will say, if you look at the tight end 5 averages or the tight end 10 averages or really any other position, the results aren't as drastic, which tells us that the weekly scoring spread from tight end 1 to the rest of the position isn't as significant as what we've seen in the past. That doesn't mean that Travis Kelce hasn't been really, really valuable. He's been one of the most valuable players in fantasy football this year. It just means that with something like DFS, let's say, punting the position seems to make sense. And again, this is just exploratory stuff, but it could make sense since the spread of points has been smaller than normal. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has averaged a 3.4% target share over the last 2 weeks. He's been maintaining a decent enough running back rush share, but the lack of targets is really concerning. Since Le'Veon Bell entered the picture, CEH has a target share per game average just a little over 8%. Before Bell, that number was 14%. The last trend this week is about Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller. As you know by now, Will Fuller was suspended for PED use and he's out for the year. He's done. Obviously, that hurts any of you who have Fuller, but it hurts Deshaun Watson a lot too. Watson's splits with and without Fuller are skewed a little bit because of DeAndre Hopkins being in the picture, but Watson has been so much better with Fuller during his career than without him. Without Fuller, Watson's passing yards per game dropped well below over 50 yards. His passing touchdowns per game by almost a full touchdown, and his points per game by about 4 fantasy points. With a tough upcoming schedule for Houston, we can't assume that Watson is a plug-and-play option. He's a big, big loser from this suspension too. That's going to do it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet to subscribe to the Late Round Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Thanks, everyone. I'll talk to you tomorrow with the Weekly Matchup Show.